Hi, everyone. I'm Jody Kielbasa, Vice Provost for the Arts and Director of the Virginia Film Festival at the University of Virginia. I'd like to welcome all of our friends, colleagues, and supporters today to the very first episode of Behind the Scenes at UVA Arts with some very special guests. So we'll get started. Again, thank you for joining us during these challenging times and taking time out of your day. I'd like to start off by introducing Carmenita Higginbotham. She's the chair of the McIntire Department of Art at the University of Virginia. Her research examines early 20th century American art with an emphasis on how notions of the city have had an impact on representation. Her book, The Urban Scene, Race, Reginald Marsh, and American Art, considers how Reginald Marsh, as an American scene artist, represents African Americans during the 1930s. Her undergraduate teaching includes lecture courses on the history of American art, African American art, and art film. Her teaching in the art history department is complemented by her courses in UVA's program in American Studies, offering cinema studies, courses on topics such as American film noir, Hollywood in the 1930s, 20th century stardom, and the cultural and visual impact of Disney in American popular culture. Jenny Wales is in her third season as the artistic director of the Heritage Theater Festival and serves as associate professor of practice in the Department of Drama, a university appointment reserved for distinguished professionals who have been recognized for contributions to their field. Wales served as the associate producer and director of education and outreach at Playmakers Repertory Company, the professional theater in residence at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She has also performed as an actor in New York City and across the country. Jenny received her MFA in acting from the Alabama Shakespeare Festival and her BA in drama from the University of Virginia. Go Who's. Matthew Mcclendon is the Sanford Miller Family Director and Chief Curator of the Fralin Museum of Art at the University of Virginia. Mcclendon is widely recognized for his cross-disciplinary curatorial practice and emphasis on community engagement in education and activating marginalized voices in the museum setting. In 2010, Mcclendon was recruited by the John and Mabel Ringling Museum of Art to revive its dormant, modern, and contemporary program. In 2011, Joseph's Coat, the largest sky space to date by artist James Turrell, was opened under Mcclendon's leadership. Mcclendon inaugurated and co-directed the Art of Our Time initiative focused on living and visual and performing artists. Since joining us at UVA, his notable exhibitions include Sometimes We Cannot Be With Our Bodies, a multi-sensory installation by Vanessa German, Unexpected O'Keeffe, the Virginia Watercolors and Later Paintings, an exhibition of the yet little known time that Georgia O'Keeffe spent as a student and instructor at UVA, and From the Grounds Up, Thomas Jefferson's Architecture and Design, a reappraisal of Jefferson's influences and impact upon architecture. He earned his MA and PhD from the Courtauld Institute of Art at the University of London, and his Bachelor of Arts degrees in Music and Art History at the Florida State University with magna cum laude honors. Welcome, all of you, and thanks for joining us today. So we have a number of questions that we've decided we want to ask and get to the bottom of, in many cases related to what's going on in the world right now with COVID-19. No surprise there. It has obviously impacted our world in so many ways, both professionally and personally, and a challenge to not only everybody here on this panel, but to our colleagues in the arts at the university, in our community of Charlottesville, and around the world. So it's a challenging time, but we're going to get through it, and I want to hear from all of you. And Jenny, I'd like to start out with you. Can you talk a little bit about the Heritage Theater Festival's decision to postpone the 2020 season to 2021 and the implications and the reasonings behind this postponement?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today and for joining us all together. So we made the decision to postpone the 2020 season in an effort to not only ensure the safety of our patrons and our company members, but also to ensure that we could push that to 2021 and still maintain our commitments to artists who've been working on the pieces that were programmed. We began planning the Heritage season usually August or September of the year before. So we've been working on these pieces for many, many months. The Guys and Dolls team had been in design meetings and auditions since January of this year. So we wanted to ensure that we could honor the contracts and keep those artistic teams together, as well as we bring about 115 company members to Charlottesville over the course of our season. And we wanted to make sure that those artists and technicians knew that their offer was still valid when we produce again next season. So that was the reasoning behind a postponement of the shows that we had programmed to 2021, so we could also bring how we had these stories and how we have thoughtfully kind of curated them to our community next summer when we're able to gather safely again.
So Jenny, never one to lose an opportunity to promote an upcoming season, even if it's been postponed for a full year. Could you share the entire season? I heard you mention Guys and Dolls. Tell us a little bit about the rest of the season as well.
So right now our season is Guys and Dolls, the book club play by Karen Zacharias, Blithe Spirit by Noel Coward, and then closing out with Hold These Truths, which is a one-person show by Jeannie Sakata. Part of the, one of the elements that we're also dealing with in regards to shifting all of these shows is that we must reapply for rights for a different time period. And so there's a lot that goes into that administratively and on the back end. And so there's that as well. But yes, that's our season for next year.
Great. Well, we sad that it's postponed, but we very much look forward to seeing it next summer. Carmen, can you tell me a little bit about how the art department has adjusted to how it functions during the pandemic, what has been gained and what has been lost at this time?
Of course, of course. Thanks for everyone for being here. The art department has really undergone some pretty amazing, exciting opportunities and thinking about how learning can happen on digital platforms since the changes in moving online this semester. We've had a chance to rethink what does it mean to engage with a work of art? What is our relationship in the classroom to, say, museums and galleries? What happens when you aren't able to stand in front of the work? What other skills are you building for students and how they look, how they interpret, how they understand art? And so this has been an exciting challenge. It's been a way for faculty to get up to speed on the latest technologies as they relate to art, both the exhibition of and the production of as well. And our studio classes have been sort of really exciting and creative in rethinking how students can create, whether it's using found objects to produce new types of sculpture, how they distribute that work to other classmates for various assessments or critiques, what a student can do with, say, a cell phone and digital photography. It's really opened up a series of challenges, but also exciting opportunities in that way.
Thank you for that. Matthew, can you share a little bit about how the shutdowns impacted the museum? I know you had just opened several new exhibitions, probably 4 or 5 weeks earlier before the shelter in place went into effect. And I understand that now you're in the process of having to pack those exhibitions up while we're under these circumstances to prepare for roofing and HVAC repairs during the summer, correct?
Yes, thank you, Jody. Hello, everyone out there. That is correct. So like all museums across the world, we found ourselves in the position of really having to make a decision that is right for the community, but is somewhat against the nature of the museum. We know that in times of crisis, people need the museum more in their lives, but of course realize that the best way to support our community was to close, and the health and safety of our staff, our visitors, our members, everyone in the UVA community and the wider community that we serve is of course the top priority. But in closing, you're absolutely right. We had a museum full of art, including a really wonderful and large-scale collaboration with our colleague institution, the Kluge-Ruhe Aboriginal Art Collection at UVA, and that's the Inside World, the Australian Aboriginal Memorial Poles exhibition. That, you know, aside from being a major collaboration with the Kluge-Ruhe, a step forward in really prioritizing the diversity of voices that we highlight at the Fralin, very importantly. It is and was a stunning exhibition, one of the most beautiful installations I think we've seen in those galleries. So it was doubly difficult to close. So I have to say the incredible staff at both institutions went to work immediately, figuring out ways that we could continue to share the exhibition with the hundreds of UVA students who were already booked to come and tour the exhibition as part of their coursework, but with our wider audiences as well. So in the last 4 hours that the museum was open and any staff was there on grounds, we had a film crew come in and do really, I think, a remarkable film with the curator of the exhibition, Henry Scarrett. And that went online a few weeks later, first and foremost to, again, UVA students and professors that needed content during this time as they were migrating their classes online, but also the classes who had been signed up to come for an experience with Henry in the exhibition. But of course, we made it available to our wider audiences as well. And I should have checked the numbers this morning. As of a day or so ago, that video, which is on our YouTube page, you can Google the Fralin Museum of Art YouTube and find it, or go to our website and find links to it. It had been viewed by over 2,500 people around the world. So we know we've had a number of views from Australia, of course. So that's been a really remarkable way of continuing the influence of that exhibition and Henry's, you know, incredible scholarship and work with the exhibition. You're right, though, we have a long planned re-roofing and HVAC work that will begin on the museum starting June 1st. So we were always intending to be closed for the summer and fall as well. And to enable that work to proceed, we have to empty the Museum of the Works of Art so that we continue to steward them in the best possible way. So following all guidelines set out by, you know, the CDC, by the Commonwealth, by OSHA, by the University of Virginia. We're all having to become experts in these guidelines, working very closely with the staff at the Fralin to make sure that everyone felt comfortable and had the PPE that they needed to feel comfortable, maintaining social distancing to really mitigate any major difficulties in this time. Our dedicated staff is working to deinstall the museum at this moment, and the Memorial Poles exhibition will be heading to Florida next, where hopefully it will be seen soon in Miami. So I think one of the key things that people can come away with, hopefully, from today's conversation is, you know, the university might have moved classes online. We might not be working in our offices at the university. The museum might be closed. The art history department, heritage theater might be dark for a time, but we're not sitting on our hands. Everyone is working as hard, or really, in fact, harder than we've ever worked before, realizing that we have to continue to support our communities, to continue to support our visitors and our artists and our faculty and our staff in this time. And really, you know, I think finding the silver lining being all the creative resources and creative ways that everyone around the world in the arts is coming up to do that.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, you know, again, never missing an opportunity for a shameless plug. We're going to be talking about virtual programming in a few moments, but if you've not seen the inside world, all of our audience out there, definitely catch it. I was stunned at how beautiful it is, how informative it is. Henry does a phenomenal job giving a tour and offers a perfect ray of hope for this particular period of time in this presentation. And I was also stunned by the quality and the production value. It reminded me of a National Geographic episode or a Discovery Channel episode, really quite extraordinary. So definitely, if you have an opportunity, make sure you see that, The Inside World. Carmen, how has the move to online classes changed how the department depth, and you touched upon it in your initial question. Tell us what it was like to make this move in just really 7 days. Is that right? And fingers crossed we don't have to move courses online for the entire fall semester. But if we do, what kind of experiences might our students expect?
Well, you're right. We are all crossing our fingers. We so want to be in the classroom, in front of students, having that opportunity to engage with them one-on-one. I think that can't be understated. But of course, we're in a situation where we're all having to make necessary adjustments. It was, I think, thrilling is a good word to use to describe what happened. I have to say, I'm always proud to be at this university and be a part of this department, but the ways in which my colleagues rallied so quickly, so creatively to change all of our classes to online was just heartwarming across the university, but definitely the art department represented in such an extraordinary way. I think that one of the challenges will be to keep the energy of the arts and the study of the arts and the practice of the arts for our students alive and have it palpable. There is a challenge with video, with being on screen, having students stay engaged. It does alter the critical kinds of questions that we ask students, the kind of work that we can expect from them as they manage potentially all of their classes online. And so it's required almost a rethinking about pedagogy in the arts, which it's exciting. It's frightening too, at times, in a field that really sees itself, of course, an important cultural bellwether here in understanding how we are to respond to culture. But as teachers and educators, we all have our favorite works of art. We all have the way we want to teach them. We know it's worked for a decade or so. And so it's invigorated learning. And I think that will definitely carry over into the fall, no matter what happens, if the courses are online or not.
Well, Carmen, it's a relief and it's exciting to hear such enthusiasm about the process. Everybody has to adapt and evolve in terms of what they're doing in terms of teaching and creating art. I know that our provost, Liz McGill, my boss, has shared with me and some of my colleagues that she believes that this is going to be an extraordinary period for creativity, particularly in the arts, that usually during times of pandemics or war or depressions, in this case we may have two of those things at least, that some of the greatest art is created. And I expect that we'll see a lot of that evolve during this process in music and visual art and theater and writing. And that is one hopefully blessing that may come out of this in the long run. So, Jenny, can you talk a little bit about your experience with the transition to online classes this past semester? And can you share any stories about students who are shifting how they work in these times and how that may have impressed you?
Yes, absolutely. I agree with Carmen. I think thrilling is a great word to encapsulate how we transitioned online. To be frank, I had no idea how I teach an experiential class. I teach a lot of different classes, but this semester I was teaching speaking in public. And so I did have that moment of, how is this going to work? How am I going to take this experiential class that then this group dynamic that we have cultivated through half of a semester and move it online? And I think for me in all of this, the bright spot has been our students. Our students have been extraordinary. They have jumped in, and I knew that first Zoom class when we all gathered together again, and I saw how committed and how rigorous and how curious the students still were, that it was going to work. And I also learned things from the students through the transition to online classes that I think have deepened my relationship to teaching and the work that I can now incorporate as we continue through online courses once we get back together again in a community. And then on the other side of things with theater and our students, I think, our students always surprise me and impress me, and I'm learning from them constantly. I think those of us who have chosen to spend our lives in a university environment, the students are the reason why. And we have a student in the drama department who's a double major, computer science and drama, who has developed software that makes it easier to present play readings online. And his name is Andy Carluccio, and he just did a work with the Public Theater in New York, and he worked with Moliere in the Park on a production of The Misanthrope, and he graduates on Saturday, but his work was reviewed in the New Yorker this week. And so I think it's really important for us to remember that our students are also beginning to lead national conversations and be involved in what the landscape will look like and how we will move through the changes and the shifts that will inevitably occur within our own individual art forms as well.
Thanks, Jenny. That's very inspiring and exciting, certainly for that student as well, too. Thanks for sharing that. Matthew, what have been the unexpected opportunities you have found in the midst of the pandemic, and any resulting changes that you anticipate in operating and programming?
Yeah, great question. I think there have been a number of unexpected opportunities and really silver linings that have come out of this. For me personally, I think for our industry as a whole, and for my colleagues at the museum as well. So one of the things with the Fralin specifically is we've known that we needed a greater digital presence, and that's been on the back burner for a while, and we're not the only museum saying this. We tend to, in museums, rightfully so, want to always emphasize the in-person interaction, and that is our strength, and in-person interaction with the work of art, and that is our strength, and we will not forget that strength or move away from it. But this has really forced us to expedite exploring how we can complement that experience and substitute during this time of closure some of that experience. So it really has been wonderful to see. Again, I have to give a shout out to my incredible colleagues at the Fralin, the best museum staff anyone could ever hope to work with, how they've come together just instantly to work across departments, to work with their colleagues nationally and be part of national conversations, to really think about how we can reimagine the museum moving forward, and to offer just a wider variety of experiences to all of our audiences. One of the things that's come out of that national conversation that I think is very important, well, two things really. We're seeing a lot of interest in the community with museums across the country, with our disabled visitors, saying that before there were difficulties in accessing a lot of your buildings, and now that you're pushing so much content online, we're finding your programs and what you offer far more accessible. So please, once you're able to reopen after the pandemic has quieted down, please don't leave that behind. It's important to keep that. And I think we're all hearing that very clearly. The other issue that's come up as we push toward online content are issues of equity. And we know that in our own community surrounding Charlottesville, but certainly nationally and internationally, we know there are real issues of equity around who has access to digital content, who has the computers and the broadband connections in their home to access that content. So we're now working again as colleagues within the Fralin, but with our national colleagues as well, to really think about how we can address these issues of equity with this online content and make sure it's reaching as many audiences as possible, particularly who need it at this moment. I'm talking a lot about working with our national colleagues. I think that's one of the other real unexpected opportunities that has come out of this. We are all members of and aligned with a number of national professional organizations for the museum field. And I have to say those organizations have really stepped up in their support of all of us and in keeping us connected. So I am on at least 4, sometimes 5 Zoom calls a week with my colleague directors through various organizations across the country of art museums primarily, but some other historic museums, historic houses come into some of these groups as well. So we're all able to share information and work together and find solutions together. And that's, you know, we see each other at most once a year at some big conference. And I think it dawned on us all in the last week, why haven't we been doing this regularly? Why aren't we meeting monthly in this way? So that's been a really exciting and unexpected silver lining as well. We're strengthening those connections, but I think it's important, as Jenny was saying, with that incredible student, and the students at UVA in large, we're leading those conversations as well. We're a very active part in the national dialogue. As we all figure this out, there's no guidebook for this. No one's experienced this in our generation, so these conversations are vital.
Matthew, while I've got you on here right now, and just briefly, because I don't want to move in this direction, I've got some other important questions that I want to ask you, but nonetheless, I think this is really important. Earlier this past year, the Fralin made an important statement about the representation of underrepresented artists moving forward. Can you share that with everybody? Because you were talking about equity, and I think that ties in very, very well with that.
Absolutely. So we've been a part of the last year and a half, we're a part of a larger strategic planning initiative, and that came to a culmination in the spring and summer. And as part of that strategic planning initiative, we realized that one of the key priorities for the Fralin as an institution, but also one of the key priorities of all the stakeholder groups that were a part of the conversation surrounding that strategic planning process was the real desire to make sure that we were giving voice to historically marginalized communities within the museum. And when I say museum, I don't mean just the Fralin, I mean museums in general, art museums in general. So moving forward, we made a commitment to exhibiting at least 50% of the art and artists that are exhibited at the museum will come from underrepresented groups. And we define underrepresented groups broadly. We did a lot of work with our colleagues in the Equal Opportunity and Civil Rights Office at UVA, who are a tremendous support for us in thinking through this. And this is, as far as we know, we're the first museum that's ever quantified this commitment. There's been a lot of talk about it for the 20 years that I've been in the museum field, but we felt like we really needed to quantify our commitment, that it needed to be at least 50%, and so that we could hold ourselves accountable, both internally and externally, as we move forward. When we look back over the last couple of years of exhibition programming at the Fralin, we find that we're already well along the way and largely meeting this goal. But we don't want to rest on our laurels, so to speak. We want to keep moving forward, look for new and innovative ways, new voices that need to be brought into the museum. And it's been so encouraging to see how the university has embraced that, but how our wider audiences have embraced that initiative as well.
Thank you. In the vein of shameless plugs again, my colleagues at the Virginia Film Festival had been concentrating a lot of their efforts on some virtual programming, and we launched last week a virtual conversation series where every other week we'll focus on a film, we'll direct people to watch that film, and then we'll have a conversation with the filmmaker afterwards. So next Wednesday, we're actually doing a film in partnership with the Festival of the Book called The Booksellers, about rare book collectors and sellers as well. And the director will be on for a moderated conversation as well. So to that end, Jenny, what are you working on in virtual programming right now?
Yeah, it's been an interesting challenge as as has been talked about, a lot of what we do is create work where there's a sense of community, where people can gather together to experience stories that look like them or that don't look like them, that there's an understanding of a shared humanity. And so it's been a tricky thing to try to take that and how do we move it online? So what we did as an organization, and my incredible colleagues at Heritage, I'm so grateful for all of their minds put together, is we took a look at what our values are and what we want our work to do, and how can we translate that to online content. So perhaps we can't replicate an entire fully produced production, but we can take elements and move those to online content. So we started a conversation series last week with Bob Chapel and I, former producing artistic director at Heritage, talking about Heritage throughout the years. We'll be interviewing and having conversations with artists who've worked at Heritage, artists who are committed to, were going to join us this summer, so that we can begin sharing some of that work in anticipation for next summer, and just trying to look at how we can reshape the work that we do to an online platform. But I think it's a really tricky thing that a lot of arts organizations are struggling with in this moment. What we do is gather together to have a shared experience. And so how do we translate that in this moment is the question.
Thank you. So I wanted to give all of you an opportunity, and I'll start with Carmen, to weigh in on what this impact is likely to have on your various departments and programs. It's not a secret out there. Almost every arts organization in the world, and certainly the University of Virginia broadly, are going to experience budget cuts this year. It's never a friendly term. We don't love it. It's challenging, but of course, this is something that we're going to have to work with, and it's going to impact all of us significantly. And so, Carmen, can you talk a little bit about what those challenges are likely to mean for the art department?
Well, for the art department, I think the impact we're going to feel definitely in the classroom. The size of our courses, our ability to have really full courses available to undergraduate students. There are challenges to trying to have a 100 or 150 person course when you're doing it online. And it's in those, at times in those larger settings, that you capture the student who wasn't quite sure what they were going to do with an art history class, but they're going to give it a shot anyway. Sometimes you lose that sort of serendipity that sometimes leads to some of the greatest, most interesting student scholars that we have here at UVA. So that will be an impact. I think you're also going to see a bit of an impact on the range of courses we're able to offer, as say things like contingent or adjunct faculty, those who help with courses, we're not able to fund them the way we would like. It will have an impact, could have an impact on studio courses, and definitely in art history courses. So we'll feel it in terms of content, we'll feel it in terms of availability of courses. And of course, we will do everything we can to keep as many doors open as possible, because you have an entire faculty and staff of individuals here who love what they do and are committed to teaching and learning and experiencing. But we'll feel that impact. We're definitely going to feel that impact, I think, over the next year or so.
Thank you. Jenny, as a public-facing program, the Heritage Summer Theater Festival, of course, will be impacted by university budget restrictions, but you also rely heavily both on ticket revenue and individual philanthropy from the community. Can you talk a little bit about concerns of challenges that this will likely have on the Heritage Theater Festival?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that not only speaking about university resources and how that impacts the theater, but also university calendar. We're dependent upon the calendar at the university. And so how is that going to impact the number of weeks that we have to produce? And then that also trickles down to the individual ticket sales, which is huge for Heritage. And we're in a situation, I think we're all having an opportunity to practice being comfortable with not knowing. And so we're not certain how long the social distancing guidelines will be put in place. So will that impact our capacity, which would impact our ticket sales, which would impact our revenue? Will all of the struggles that are happening currently, how long will that last? How will that impact our foundation support, our corporate support? So my incredible managing director, Jen Rogers, has been working on multiple modeling scenarios budget-wise, so we can try to be as nimble as possible. And of course, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know exactly what's going to happen, but how can we shore up our organization as best as possible to get back to why we're doing what we're doing? We want to share these stories with our community. So how can we do that with these ever-changing issues that inevitably are going to come up as we navigate not only these coming weeks, but coming months and potentially coming years? So I think these are things that we don't necessarily have an answer for, but are trying to look at different models and possibilities to see how things can shift, and we can still stay clear and true to our mission and why we're doing what we're doing.
Thank you. Matthew, although I know the university offers significant support to the Fralin Museum of Art, I'm also aware of how much support comes from the general public, from your board of directors, in terms of important philanthropic gifts that sustain the museum. Could you talk a little bit about the challenges that you anticipate moving forward?
Absolutely. Well, I think, one of the most immediate things to come out of this and how the university is reacting to it, and the things put in place to, again, maintain the integrity of the university, which before I get there, I should just say how reassuring and how really fortunate, in a way, I felt to be at UVA during this time. As I look at universities across the country and their response to the COVID-19 pandemic, as I talk to my colleagues at other university museums, institutions, I think that UVA has done a particularly admirable job in their messaging of messaging people first, and messaging the importance of maintaining the faculty and staff and community of UVA and the continuity of that. And I really appreciate that as a staff member of UVA, hearing that that is the highest priority from our president and provost on down. So we echo that at the Fralin as well. My main agenda as far as the museum is concerned as we go through this, keeping in mind Jenny is very right, no one has a crystal ball to know how long this will go on and where this will end. But our main priority is, of course, maintaining the integrity of the museum and maintaining the staff and the integrity of the staff of the museum. UVA has implemented, like I think every university across the country at this point, a hiring freeze. So for us, what that means is we were looking to add a new support position that supports both our collections department and education departments in this next year, so that will be on hold for now. We've come off a remarkable 3-year period of growth at the museum in every way, really, and that includes philanthropic support, for which we are exceedingly grateful. But now I think, as all arts organizations and education and organizations for that matter, will be moving, I think, much more into a period of maintenance rather than growth. So we want to maintain our commitments to our communities. We want to maintain the incredible programming that everyone at the Fralin offers to the community and the support that creates in the community at this time. So that will really be the focus moving forward.
Thank you. Well, I have a lot more questions, but I really want to shift to asking some questions from our audience. So I have Gretchen Tibbetts, who is the chair of the UVA Arts Council and a longtime friend and supporter of the arts at the University of Virginia. Gretchen writes, thanks to all of you for the work that you're doing to figure this out, and especially acknowledging issues of equity. We all know the impact of the pandemic on the arts will continue, especially for those public-facing groups like the Virginia Film Festival, the Symphony, Heritage, and our museums that either get their funding from ticket sales or philanthropy. How can people help? Jenny, would you like to lead off with that?
Sure, absolutely. How can people help? I mean, I think a lot of, thank you, Gretchen, for that question. And I think one thing that I will say, having known Gretchen and worked with Gretchen, is one thing that's extraordinary about her is what a advocate she is for the arts, not at the university and in our community, but also the importance of the arts writ large. And so I think one thing that people can do is continue to be advocates for the arts during these times, to acknowledge that the arts are definitely helping us get through these times where we are in our homes, when we're longing for a communal experience. And I think the arts are going to be imperative as we emerge to heal our communities and unite our communities. So I think advocacy is a huge thing, just to ensure that people know, as Matthew said earlier, that we're continuing to work. We are continuing, even though Heritage isn't producing this summer, we're still working tirelessly to ensure that we can continue to provide content and a connection to our community. So I think advocacy is a huge thing to, that would be my answer.
Great, thanks, Jenny. You know, I might share with everybody out there that obviously the arts have been thrilled that during this very challenging time, President Ryan has chosen to highlight a digital version of Arts on the Hill, a program we had started with him just prior to shutting down. And he's continued with this program for the last 5-6 weeks now, bringing the university performers and creatives and alumni together in a show that airs every Sunday evening. And it's really been quite extraordinary. And he's viewed the arts as a way to really connect and to bring the community together. So we've been thrilled with that. Matthew, how can you respond to this as well? How can people help?
Absolutely. I want to continue on with Jenny's wonderful comments in something that I've been thinking about a lot in the last few days, because like everyone else, I start my morning off watching the news as I'm getting ready to make my very long commute of 10 steps to my new desk. But I am watching the news in the morning, and so we're hearing all of the economic news and the very grim economic news. And I think the arts get lost in that because we're called the arts. I think that if you can advocate for us in your communities as small businesses, that will change the conversation. And I looked up before we began today, in case there was an opportunity. There are some really vital statistics on what the arts contribute to the nation, but also their communities as well. So in 2019, the US Bureau of Economics and Analysis and the National Endowments for the Arts produced, I think, what was at that point the largest survey of this kind of data. And they found that the arts contribute $763.6 billion to the US economy. That's 4.2% of the GDP, and that is more than agriculture, transportation, or warehousing. And I don't think people necessarily associate that with the arts when we are talking about the economics of the current situation. For museums in particular, the head of the Alliance of American Museums is estimating that through this closure, museums nationwide are losing $33 million a day. So we are real economic forces within our communities. and within the nation. So if you think about, as you're advocating for us, not just all the wonderful, for lack of a better term, soul nurturing work that we do in our communities, the Fralin employs 21 full-time people. Those are 21 people that might not otherwise be employed by the university if the museum were not there. So those 21 people, it always goes back to that great image of dropping the stone in the water and the concentric circles that radiate out from that. Those 21 people are supported by the university and the Fralin, who then in turn support their communities. So advocacy is important, but I think in this time, we have to be advocating on all fronts, and I think that economic front gets left behind, if that makes sense.
Right, thank you. Carmen, how's this going to impact the Department of Art? And what can people do? I mean, I know how it's going to impact it, but what can people do to help? Excuse me.
Take art classes. Be present in these activities. I mean, and thinking about what Jenny's saying and Matthew is saying and what we do, whether or not these programs are online, whether or not they happen exactly the way we envision them, I think there is something to the fact that we are there and we are present and we are engaged, to stay engaged, whether it is a community scholar who is interested in taking an art history or a studio class, whether it's someone who does want to stay involved in Heritage Theater or the Fralin. I think whether it's a student who is just uncertain and thinking about the limited schedule that they have and, oh my gosh, I have to be out in 4 years. There is a way in which being present, being active by being engaged and showing up really is important. And now it's different when one's dealing with classes at the university and credit hours and what have you. That is very particular and unique from what's happening with Heritage and with the Fralin. But I think what we all have in common is this need for activity and action, for just the mass to be there, to show their commitment through attending and attendance. And because all this information is also going to be recorded in a post-pandemic environment as we all try to navigate how we have been changed permanently by this. There is no going back to what the arts were before. I think we're all sort of embracing that there have been real opportunities here that we need to keep into the mix as we move forward. Things that, as Matthew has said, has led to, can lead to greater accessibility, more individuals being aware of what it is we do. And I think those adjustments and changes will be part of the future, and having the masses there. And get undergraduates, get young people to take art and art history classes, even if they're thinking about the comm school, even if they're thinking about some other direction or education. Remind them that what they do with the arts is integral to any other profession that they have or they may seek. And it's good. It's a very good thing that they get involved in art and art history.
Wow, that is fantastic. And it perfectly sets up, Carmen, my very last question. Thank you for that. You were talking about there's no going back. So my last question, which I'm going to ask each of you, but Carmen, we've got you on now, basically start with you. And you touched on this a little bit. So if you could just expand on it a little bit more, what changes and challenges do you see in the near future and beyond? Will theater change? Will the museum experience change? Has this experience changed the teaching model? What do you see happening in your world moving forward?
Moving forward, I think there's going to be a real conversation about the ways in which we use technology and pedagogy. That we have always been making strides to think about how to bring art to students, but now that's accelerated, I think, in a way that is exciting and frightening and challenging all wrapped up together. So whether it's virtual reality and thinking about how we can use that more rigorously within the classroom, even on the micro level in terms of assignments and really understanding the benefits of digital platforms that museums use to allow you to have access to works of art. I do believe always in going to the museum, Matthew, I always do, going to the museum and seeing the work live. But I have to admit for myself, I've been reticent about having my students spend time in the Louvre online. Or some other collections, because in some of these museums did not have the technology, they hadn't digitized their works, hadn't thought about the presentation of their works really rigorously digitally beyond just a quick slideshow. That's all changed. And because that's changed for them, that changes what we do in the classroom as well. In terms of studio, the ways in which our faculty are working with technology and different assignments for students, that's something very particular, I think, with studio, because there is that need to be in front of the student when you're working with materials. And so there's just going to be a lot of rethinking all the way around. Really exciting, really challenging, really scary, but all necessary and very good.
Great. Thanks, Carmen. Matthew, what do you think about this? How's the museum experience going to change, and even beyond arts in general?
I basically just want to say ditto after Carmen. That was amazing. Thank you, Carmen. I'm ready to go. There's so many ways to answer this question. In the short term, absolutely, the museum experience will change. Social distancing is going to be with us for a long time. We know that communities are not ready now and probably will not be ready for some time to be in groups, especially large groups. That has been a big part of, a certain kind of museum experience. So we know that will change in the near and foreseeable future. To echo Carmen's point, our strength is the object, and our strength is the close proximity we offer to the object. That will not go away. We will continue to understand, and everything will flow from that strength. But what this has opened up to us, and I think what we've all been talking about today, is it is allowing us and encouraging us and forcing us, quite frankly, to look for all the complementary experiences that we can offer to that. And we know, I've been thinking, in the early 90s, when digitization became a thing and museums could start to put their collections online, there was a big push in the museum world not to do that, because if they can see your collections online, why would they come to your museum? We quickly found that it had the exact opposite effect. The more people could see online of your museum and your collections, the more curious and intrigued they were, and the more likely they were to come and visit you in person. So I think we're all thinking about that in this moment, thinking about how we can offer ways for people to interact with the collections that will be enticing to them and that will pique their curiosity. This is my point to give a shout out to our new webpage on our website, The Fralin from Home. I'm seeing we've had some questions come up about, are you offering this to the public? Is it free? Yes. So we are, because the Fralin is closed for now the summer and fall, we are slowly rolling out our digital offerings. But if you go to the Fralin, if you can Google Fralin from Home, you can just go on our website and find the tab at the top. You'll start to see these digital offerings that we're putting out, starting with Henry's wonderful tour of the inside world. Two of our educators have put up some wonderful fast time drawing exercises that you can do with your kids at home, as all parents are becoming teachers in this moment. The curatorial staff of the museum is working on more university and adult level content that we'll be pushing out this summer as a kind of summer school, or what we're calling summer shorts. So all of that material will be available. And I should also say, this Friday, if you are in the Charlottesville area, check online. We'll be doing our first community event with our community partner, Early Mountain Vineyards, and wine tasting and art Friday at 6 p.m. So you can go online and find out more about that. And there's still time. If you're in the Charlottesville area, you can buy your wine and go and pick it up at the vineyards. So all of that and more will be coming your way. So keep checking back on our website often.
Jenny, parting thoughts on the world of theater being changed.
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know ultimately, but I think as artists and as art makers, one of the gifts that we have is the ability to practice empathy every day through how we make our work. And what we try to do is distill the human experience. And so when I think about how theater will change or how we as artists will change, I kind of think about it in a very specific way, in that there are a lot of individual artists who come together communally to produce theater, and all of those individual artists will be changed through this experience. And we are experiencing also an opportunity to practice empathy daily, worldwide, as we are navigating these times together. So I'm not certain exactly how things will look or what will happen or what will be the response, but I can't help but think that we as artists will be changed by this, and that will impact and influence how we make work moving forward as different people.
Thank you. So everyone, that's a wrap for our very first UVA Arts webinar. You guys were terrific. I'm so grateful for your participation in this. For anyone who's interested out there, if you want to share this with anybody, it's going to be archived on our UVA Arts YouTube channel. So you'll have a chance to check this out moving forward. If I was not able to answer your questions to our audience out there, my apologies. I thought we just had such a terrific conversation going that I decided to let them move ahead on some of these subjects. Again, I'm grateful to everyone out there. Thank you for your support, for your interest, and be safe and stay well. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.